The road to Murray was colder than I'd expected. By the time my bus rattled into the market square, the sun had sunk behind the mountains, leaving the streets washed in blue shadows. I hauled my backpack over my shoulder, breathing in the sharp pine air, and wandered toward the stalls closing up for the night. Strings of fairy lights flickered weakly overhead, and the last few shopkeepers huddled around a dented propane heater, laughing over steaming cups of chai. Normal, quiet. That's when I saw her. She stood motionless at the far corner of the market, her silhouette sharp against the fog rolling in. A red bridal lehenga, embroidered with gold, glowed unnaturally bright in the dimness. The fabric looked too thin for the cold, fluttering like smoke around her ankles. Her head was bowed, long black hair veiling her face. No one else seemed to notice her. Curiosity prickled my skin. I drifted closer, my boots crunching over frost. "Are you lost?" I called out. She didn't move, not even a shiver. The air around her felt heavier, colder, like standing in the wake of an open freezer. "My wedding party left me," she whispered suddenly. Her voice was hollow, as if echoing from the bottom of a well. "The car broke down. They never came back." I froze. Her hands, pale as marble, clutched a faded bouquet of dried roses, thorns still clinging to the stems. Something sharp pricked at my instincts. "Leave," it hissed, but guilt glued me in place. What if she was hurt? "Let me help," I said, stepping closer. "There's a police station." Her head snapped up, my breath caught. Her eyes were pure black, glossy and depthless, reflecting nothing. The skin around them was cracked like old porcelain, veins spiderwebbing dark under the surface. A chill clawed up my spine as her lips twisted into a smile too wide for her face. "You're kind," she said, tilting her head. A sickening click came from her neck. "But I don't need the police." Behind me, the propane heater sputtered out. The market fell silent. I stumbled backward, my throat tight. The market's fairy lights dimmed one by one, plunging us into a suffocating darkness. Only her red lehenga burned bright, like fresh blood under moonlight. She glided toward me, her feet hovering inches above the frost. The dried roses in her hand crumbled to ash, but the thorns remained, rattling like bones in the wind. "Stay back!" I shouted, voice cracking. My heel caught on an icy cobblestone and I fell hard, pain shooting up my palms. The shopkeeper's laughter was gone. The stalls stood empty, tarps flapping wildly in a sudden icy gust. She laughed, a sound like glass shattering. "You saw me!" she crooned. "Now you'll stay." I scrambled to my feet and ran. The narrow market alley twisted ahead, shadows swallowing the path. My breath came in ragged clouds, and the cold bit my lungs. Behind me, the jingle of her gold bangles grew louder, closer. I dared a glance back. She wasn't chasing. She was floating, her red veil streaming behind her like a flame. Her black eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. The cracks in her skin deepened, oozing a thick, black liquid that hissed as it hit the snow. I ducked into a side alley, pressing myself against a boarded-up tea shop. My heart hammered so loud I feared she'd hear it. The stench of burnt hair filled the air. A drop of that black liquid splattered onto my jacket sleeve. It sizzled, eating through the fabric. I slapped it away, stifling a scream. "Where are you?" Her voice echoed from every direction, playful and venomous. "Come light my fare as my wedding vows." A memory flashed. A story my grandmother once told. Ghosts bound to unfinished rituals. Was she trapped in hers? I spotted a flicker of light farther ahead, a lone guest house, its sign creaking in the wind. I bolted, skidding across ice. The door was unlocked. I slammed it shut behind me, heaving a dusty sofa against it. The room was cluttered, lit by a single kerosene lamp. Old newspapers littered the floor, headlines screaming. "Missing tourists in Murray. Unexplained disappearances." A cold breath grazed my ear. "You can't hide from a bride," she whispered. I whirled around. She stood in the center of the room, her red dress now tattered, stained with that black ooze. The walls began to bleed, dark, viscous streaks spreading like roots. Her cracked hands reached for me, thorns sprouting from her fingertips. "Join me," she said, smiling. "The Sindor never fades. Her thorns graze my throat, cold and sharp." I lurch backward, knocking over the kerosene lamp. Flame licks the old newspapers and fire erupts across the floor, painting the room in frantic orange light. The woman recoils, hissing, her dress smoldering where embers catch. For a heartbeat, her face shifts, a flicker of something human, terrified. "You're still burning," I gasp. The walls bleed faster, the black ooze pooling at her feet. She screams, a sound that shakes the rafters, and the guest house groans like a living thing. Plaster rains from the ceiling. I dive through the flames, shielding my face, and burst out the back door into a blizzard. Snow stings my eyes, but I don't stop running. The market is gone. Only pine trees loom around me, skeletal and creaking. Wind carries her voice, fractured now. "You lit the fire. You lit it for me." I don't look back. I run until my legs give out, collapsing behind a boulder. My hands shake as I fumble for my phone. No signal. The cold seeps into my bones, and I curl tighter, praying for dawn, a faint jingle of bangles. No. I peer over the rock. Down the slope, her red figure drifts between the trees, head swiveling mechanically. Her neck cracks with each turn. She's searching. "I see you," she sing-songs. I clamp a hand over my mouth. The Sindor, the vermilion in her hair, is dripping down her forehead like a wound. My grandmother's voice whispers in my memory. "A bride Sindor is a pact. Break the pact. Break the ghost." But how? My fingers brush my jacket pocket. A small Swiss Army knife, useless against a spirit, unless... I slice my palm, wincing as blood wells. Rituals bind them. Gran had said, blood binds deeper. "Hey!" I shout, standing. She freezes. Then she's hurtling toward me, faster than the wind, thorns lengthening into claws. I fling my bleeding hand at her. "Your pact is over." The blood spatters her forehead, mixing with the Sindor. She shrieks, clawing at her face, the red and black smearing into mud. Her body convulses, limbs snapping like dry branches, and she collapses into a heap of fabric and ash. Silence. Dawn breaks, pale and fragile. The market reappears in the distance, shopkeepers stirring, oblivious. My hand throbs, the cut already crusted black. I hitch a ride out of Murray that morning, but as the bus descends the mountain, I glimpse her in the rearview mirror, a flash of red between the pines, her cracked smile following me. And every night since, no matter where I am, I wake to the smell of burnt roses and the faint jingle of bangles outside my door. I should have listened to the old man at the tea stall. "No one climbs Thandi Sadak after dark," he'd warned, squinting at the snow-heavy clouds. "The mountains forget the living when the sun dies." But I'd laughed it off. Ghost stories are cheap thrills for tourists, right? Wrong. The trail vanished an hour ago. Now I'm knee-deep in snow, the wind screaming through pines so tall they blot out the sky. My phone's flashlight barely cuts through the gloom, and the cold bites through my gloves like teeth. I follow the faint crunch of my own footsteps, praying they loop back to the road. Instead, the trees thin abruptly, opening into a clearing. Moonlight spills over a circle of stones, too perfect to be natural. Each one is carved with symbols, spirals, jagged lines, eyes. In the center, ashes cling to a charred pit. A fire, but there's no smoke smell, just sugar, burnt sugar. My stomach turns. A giggle cuts through the wind, high-pitched, mocking. I spin, flashlight trembling. "Who's there?" Silence. Then a rustle above me. A woman perches on a branch, her bare feet dangling. She wears a tattered shawl the color of frost, hair streaked with ice. Her face is young, beautiful, but her eyes yellow, like a wolf's. She grins, revealing teeth filed to points. "Lost little lamb," she croons. Another laugh, this time behind me. A second woman steps from the shadows, identical down to the wolfish eyes. She drags a long nail over the stone symbol, sparks trailing in its wake. We'll guide you, they say together, voices harmonizing unnaturally. My pulse hammers, every instinct screams to run, but the cold has numbed my legs. The first woman leaps down, landing soundlessly. Up close, her shawl isn't cloth, it's moth wings sewn together. She sniffs my scarf, nostrils flaring. Hungry, she purrs. The second witch circles me, humming a lullaby. The tune slithers into my skull, softening my panic. Just follow, it whispers. No more cold. Come, they say, taking my hands. Their skin burns, fever hot. We'll feed you, warm you. We'll have something glints in the fire pit. A bone, half-melted gold rings fused to it. Human. I wrench free, stumbling back. The lullaby snaps into a snarl. The witch's faces twist, jaws unhinging. Too wide, too many teeth. The snow beneath them bubbles, blackening like tar. Run, the first witch giggles. We love chasing. I bolt into the trees. Their laughter follows, claws scraping bark. The forest swallows me whole. Branches tear at my coat, and the witch's laughter echoes from every direction, bouncing off the pines like a twisted game of hide and seek. My lungs burn, but I don't stop. Their voices coil around me, sweet and venomous. You'll tire soon. We always taste better when afraid. Snow gives way to slush, then to a slick black ice that reeks of rot. My boots skid and I crash into a frozen stream. The water beneath the ice glows faintly, sickly green. Shapes move in it, skeletal hands, faces pressed to the glassy surface, mouths screaming silently. I scramble back, but the witches materialize on either bank, their moth-wing shawls fluttering. See our larder? One croons, kneeling to tap the ice. A face beneath her finger bursts into ash. Plenty of room for you. I crawl backward, numb fingers fumbling for anything to defend myself. My hand closes around a branch, brittle, useless. The second witch licks her pointed teeth. Stubborn meat, she sighs. Let's tenderize him. They raise their arms and the forest changes. The pines twist into gnarled, human-like shapes, groaning as they bend toward me. Roots erupt from the ground, snagging my ankles. The witches hum that lullaby again, louder now, and the melody prickles like spiders crawling under my skin. My muscles slacken. Stop fighting, the song insists. Sleep. But then, a flicker of firelight in the distance. A cabin. I bite my tongue until blood floods my mouth, shock jolting me awake. The roots retreat, hissing. The witches screech in unison as I lurch toward the light, their claws slashing the air where my neck had been. The cabin is decrepit, its roof sagging, but smoke curls from the chimney. I slam the door shut, barricading it with a rusted shovel. The room is cluttered with jars, herbs, dead moths, teeth. A frayed rug lies in the center, stained dark. Above the fireplace hangs a photo, a hiking group. Faces scratched out except one woman. Familiar, the frost-haired witch. A floorboard creaks behind me. An old woman sits at a table I hadn't noticed before, peeling an apple with a bone-handled knife. Her eyes are milky, blind, but she smiles. Sit, she rasps. They won't come in here. Who are you? I pant. Their mother, she says, pointing the knife at the photo. They were mine once, before the mountain hungered. She slides the apple toward me. It's riddled with maggots. Outside, the witches wail. Mother, give him back. The old woman stands, her joints cracking like dry wood. They want you to join the feast, she says, shuffling to the fireplace. She tosses the apple into the flames. It screams, but I'll trade. A story for your life. What story? She turns, her blind eyes suddenly sharp. The one you'll tell after I carve out your tongue. The door splinters. Claws scrape wood. The old woman licks her lips. Choose their teeth or mine. The old woman's knife gleams in the firelight. Outside, her daughters screech, splintering the door. My eyes dart to the jars of teeth, the maggot-rotted apple, the bone-handled blade. Choose, she'd said. But choices here taste like poison. I grab the closest jar and hurl it at her. It shatters, teeth scattering like hail. She hisses, clawing at her blind eyes as if the sound hurts her. "Fool," she spits. "They'll chew your soul to pulp." The door explodes inward. The frost-haired witches surge in, their moth-winged shawls flaring, yellow eyes blazing. The cold they bring snuffs the fireplace. Darkness swallows the room. "Mine," snarls one, lunging. I dive under the table, her claws gouging wood. The old woman wails, "No, he's my story to tell." She slashes wildly with her knife, slicing her daughter's arm. Black blood sprays, sizzling on the floor. Chaos erupt. Snarls, screams, the stench of burnt sugar and decay. I crawl toward the fireplace, my hand closing around the bone-handled knife dropped in the fight. The blind woman's words echo. The mountain hungered. The photo, the scratched-out faces, sacrifices. I stab the knife into the photograph. A deafening shriek shakes the cabin. The witches freeze, clutching their heads. The mountain itself seems to howl, wind screaming through cracks in the walls. The photo blackens, curling into ash, and the frost-haired witch in the image moves, her face twisting in agony. "Traitor!" she screams at the old woman. "You gave him the blade," the blind mother roars. "I gave you life." I don't wait. I bolt for the broken door, snow stinging my face. The forest is alive. Trees clawing at me, roots snaking over my boots. But the witch's cries fade behind, swallowed by the mountain's wrath. Dawn breaks gray and thin. I find the road by accident, half buried in snow. A truck driver picks me up, muttering about mad foreigners hiking in storms. I don't speak. My hands won't stop shaking. But as Murray disappears in the rear view, I notice its bite on my wrist. Small, precise, 2 punctures like snake fangs. The skin around it is already gray, numb. That night in a cramped hostel, I scratch open the wound. Maggots writhe inside, and I hear them, laughter. Not outside, inside my head. "Stories keep us alive," the voices coo. "Tell ours, or we'll tell yours." The next morning I buy a notebook. My hand moves on its own, writing words I don't remember. Witches on the mountains, hungry, waiting. The bite spreads, the maggots multiply, but the voices, they're quiet now. I came to Galiat to forget. The mountains were supposed to be quiet. No sirens, no shouting matches through apartment walls, just snow and silence. But the villagers warned me at dusk. "Don't walk the cedar trails after dark," an old woman muttered, her knuckles whitening around her shawl. "The ghosts hunts again." I shrugged it off. Ghosts don't leave paw prints. By midnight, regret tasted bitter on my tongue. The moon hung low, bloated and yellow as I trudged back to my rented cabin. The trail was slick with ice, pines groaning in the wind. That's when I heard it. A low, rumbling growl, closer than my own heartbeat. I froze. The forest held its breath. Then a scream. Human, female, raw with terror. It came from the valley below, clawing up the cliffs. I fumbled for my flashlight, but the batteries were dead. Idiot. The village elder's words slithered back. It mimics voices, lures you. Something crunched the snow behind me. Slow, deliberate, I turned. 2 green eyes glowed in the dark, floating at shoulder height. The beam of my phone's dying screen caught a flicker of spotted fur, a twitching tail, a leopard. But its outline, wrong, smudged, like a charcoal sketch left in the rain. It vanished when I blinked. The scream came again, this time from uphill, begging, "Help me!" Logic frayed. It's just a big cat, I told myself, not a ghost, not a demon. But my legs moved on their own, chasing the voice. Stupid, heroic, desperate. The trail narrowed, stones slick with frost. A torn scrap of fabric fluttered on a branch, bright pink, stained brown at the edges. Blood? I pocketed it, hands shaking. Deeper into the trees, the air thickened with the stench of rot and wet fur. A cabin emerged, door ajar. Inside, A kerosene lamp guttered. "Hello?" I called, voice cracking. No answer. On the threshold I gagged. The walls were gouged with claw marks, deep and frenzied. A cot lay shredded, feathers drifting like snow. And on the floor, a single gold earring, crusted with dried blood. The growl reverberated through the room. Not behind me, above. I looked up. The leopard clung to the rafters, its mouth stretched too wide, dripping saliva thick as oil. Its eyes weren't green anymore. They were human. Blue. Desperate. Those blue eyes froze me, not the cold animal stare of a predator. Human. Pleading. Familiar. The earring in my pocket burned like a coal. The leopard dropped from the rafters, landing silently. Its body blurred at the edges, smoke curling off its fur. It circled me, head low, lips peeled back in a snarl that didn't match the sorrow in its stolen eyes. Saliva pooled around its paws, black and bubbling. I edged toward the door. The leopard mirrored me, cutting off my escape. The lamp flickered, shadows dancing like claws on the walls. "What are you?" I whispered. It lunged. I dove sideways, crashing into a shelf. Glass jars rained down, shattering. The stench of formaldehyde punched my lungs. Specimens floated in liquid. A finger, a child's shoe, a clump of hair. The leopard swiped, shredding my sleeve. Hot pain bloomed across my forearm. I scrambled behind the cot, hurling a jar at its head. The leopard dissolved mid-leap, becoming smoke, then solidified again by the door. Its growl shook the room, deeper than any animal's. A voice. Meta kun, the words, Urdu broken, choked, oozed from its throat. My blood. The lamp died. In the dark, those blue eyes glowed. I fumbled for the door, but it slammed shut. The leopard's breath hit my neck, rancid meat and iron. "Dika," it rasped. "Show me." My hand shot to my pocket, the pink fabric. I dropped it. The leopard snatched the scrap in its jaws, whining. For a heartbeat, its form wavered. A woman flickered inside the smoke, young, face torn, wearing half a gold earring. Then it screamed, a human scream, and exploded through the window. I ran, not toward the village, but deeper into the valley, following the leopard's smoky trail. Blood dripped from my arms, staining the snow. The trees thinned, revealing a shrine half buried in ice. Ragged prayer flags fluttered, their colors faded to gray. At its base lay offerings, rotting fruit, broken bangles, and a photo, a wedding portrait. The bride wore pink, her smile bright, gold earrings glinting, same as the scrap, her eyes, blue, the leopard's eyes. Footsteps crunched behind me. A man emerged from the trees, a rusted rifle slung over his shoulder. His face was gaunt, haunted. "You saw her," he said, voice hollow. "The leopard. It's her, isn't it?" He nodded. "My Ayesa, the leopard killed her on our wedding day. Took her body and her rue. Now she hunts, trying to piece herself back." He pointed to the shrine. "Through us. Through us?" The gun cocked. "Her soul's trapped in that beast. Only blood frees it." He raised the rifle. "Her blood, or yours?" The leopard's roar shook the valley. The rifle's muzzle stared at me, black and unblinking. Behind the man, the leopard materialized from the trees, smoke curling off its fur, its blue eyes locked onto mine. Aisha's eyes, wide with rage and grief. "Wait," I shouted, yanking the gold earring from my pocket. "She's in there. We can save her." The man hesitated. The leopard lunged. It knocked him sideways, the rifle discharging into the air. The crack of the shot scattered crows from the pines. I dove behind the shrine as the beast pinned the man, its jaws snapping inches from his throat. He screamed, "Aisha!" The name hung in the air like a prayer. The leopard froze, trembling. For a heartbeat, the smoke cleared, and the woman flickered inside it again, her torn wedding dress soaked in blood. She reached for her husband's face. "John," she whispered through the beast's throat. The man sobbed. "I'm sorry, I couldn't save you. I tried to end it." The leopard shuddered, snarling, fighting itself. Aisha's voice broke through. "Katem Karo! Finish it!" The man grabbed a jagged rock and slashed his palm. Blood welled, dark and thick. He pressed it to the leopard's forehead. "Merakun, Terakun," he chanted. "My blood, your blood." The leopard howled. Aisha's form solidified, her ghostly hands clawing out of the beast's chest. The leopard's body writhed, splitting like rotten cloth, until Aisha stood half-transparent, her wedding dress fluttering in the wind. The leopard collapsed into ash, leaving only its bones. But Aisha didn't fade. She turned to me, her eyes no longer blue, but hollow. "You saw," she said. "Now you carry it." A searing pain shot through my wounded arm. I ripped back my sleeve, 3 claw marks, glowing faintly blue. The man staggered to his feet. "The curse passes," he muttered. "She's free, but the ghost needs a new keeper." "What?" He didn't answer. He simply limped into the trees, leaving me alone with Aisha's bones and the shrine's hollow silence. The villagers found me at dawn, frostbitten and delirious. They burned the leopard's bones, salted the shrine, and warned me never to return. But back in the city, the nightmares come. I see the cedar forests, feel the cold gnawing my bones, and hear the growl, not in the shadows, but under my skin.